There are moments in life that change your direction completely. Not in a motivational quote kind of way, but in a very real physical sense. For me, that moment happened on a little road in Vietnam. I crashed a motorbike at full speed and ended up lying on the side of the road with an open fracture, losing a lot of blood, not knowing if I'd even keep my leg. That experience didn't suddenly give me clarity or purpose, but I think it forced me to slow down and eventually question how I was living and what I was actually building. This video isn't just about that accident, it's about the path around it. From chasing speed and adrenaline as a teenager, to traveling without direction, to slowly building a relationship with movement that's more about control, awareness, and longevity. And how something as simple as learning to balance on your hands became a starting point for all of that. If you're into movement, training, or just trying to figure out how to build something sustainable for yourself, physically and/or mentally, this will probably speak to you. I'll walk you through the full journey, what changed, what didn't, and what I took from it. But this story didn't begin in Vietnam. It began many years earlier, in a very small town near Frankfurt in Germany. So I grew up with two brothers and a father who had played professional handball. Sport was always part of our family. Movement was normal. But even among my brothers, I was always the one who seemed to be obsessed with it. I started athletics when I was very young. Running, jumping, throwing, and for a while I was actually quite successful. I won competitions, especially in long jump and throwing events. But something about my personality was already visible even back then. I loved winning. But when I stopped being first every time, my motivation also disappeared. At the same time, I was a very introverted child and school was super difficult for me. I was extremely sensitive to noise. Classrooms felt overwhelming. Sometimes I was genuinely afraid to go to school. But my childhood happened before smartphones and social media. So most of our time was spent outside. My brothers and I climbed trees, built things, ran through forests, invented our own games. Movement was simply part of life. Looking back now, I think those early years shaped something important inside me. Because even though I didn't realize it yet, movement had already become my way of interacting with the world. When I entered my teenage years, things slowly began to change. My brothers and I started developing very different interests. And I began navigating that strange phase between childhood and adulthood. Around the age of 13, I started drinking alcohol and smoking. At the same time, I had many insecurities about my own body. I was extremely skinny. And as a teenage boy, that can create a lot of self-doubt. So I started doing push-ups in my room, just a few sets at first. But something about it fascinated me. Because for the first time, I realized that I could actually change my body through effort. As soon as I was old enough, I joined a gym, and bodybuilding quickly became a huge part of my life. The structure of training gave me something that I think I was missing elsewhere: discipline, progress, control. But there was also another force inside me that was just as strong: freedom. From a very young age, I had a deep desire to be independent. At 15, I bought my first scooter with money I had earned delivering newspapers. For me, that little scooter meant everything. Freedom of movement, freedom to leave, and 2 years later, at 17, I bought my first motorcycle, a Kawasaki Ninja. Looking back now, I realized how reckless I was, riding 200 kilometers per hour on the German Autobahn, often without proper protective gear. I think at that age you just feel like invincible, like life has no consequences, but eventually school ended. And suddenly everyone around me seemed to know what they were going to do next, except me. After finishing school, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do with my life. Like many people in that situation, I think I simply followed the most obvious path. I started studying business administration. But almost immediately something felt wrong. I was sitting in lecture halls listening to topics that didn't excite me at all. Around me were people who seemed confident about their future careers in finance, consulting, or corporate management. But deep down I knew that wasn't the life I wanted. The problem was I didn't know what I did want. And when you don't know what direction to take, sometimes the best thing you can do is move. So after only 2 semesters, I made a decision that scared me and excited me at the same time. I booked a one-way ticket to Australia. It was the first time I had ever traveled that far away from home. For the first time in my life, I was completely on my own, on the other side of the planet. And honestly, I had no real plan. But something surprising happened when I arrived. I realized that I could actually handle it. Like, life in Australia was simple. During the day, I worked wherever I could find work. Construction sites, farms, or any kind of physical job that would allow me to earn money and continue traveling. Some weeks I worked 60 or even 70 hours. Hard labor under the sun. In the evenings we drank, often a lot. Alcohol and smoking weed were part of everyday life. But even during that chaotic time, one thing remained constant, and that was training. No matter where I was, I trained. Sometimes in gyms, sometimes outside, sometimes in strange improvised places where training equipment barely existed. It didn't matter. Movement had already become something essential for me. Something that gave structure to a life that otherwise had very little structure. Sleeping arrangement didn't matter much either. Sometimes it was a hostel, sometimes a couch, sometimes just a mattress on the floor. As long as I could work, earn money, train and experience freedom, I was happy. Looking back, those months taught me something important. I learned that I could actually survive uncertainty. I learned that life didn't always need a detailed plan. And somewhere during that time, something else quietly entered my life. Handstands. I remember being at a place called Wave Rock on the west coast of Australia. A huge rock formation rising out of the landscape like a giant frozen wave. For some reason, I tried balancing upside down on top of it. My first clumsy attempts at a handstand. At that time, it meant absolutely nothing. Just another physical challenge. But looking back now, I think that moment planted a seed. After my year in Australia ended, I still wasn't ready to go home. There was too much of the world left to explore. So my girlfriend at the time joined me and we continued traveling through Southeast Asia. One of the countries we were most excited about was Vietnam. We had this romantic idea of just buying a motorcycle and crossing the entire country from south to north. And that's exactly what we did. So we bought a small motorbike in Ho Chi Minh City, 2 backpacks strapped on the back, and then we started riding. For weeks we moved slowly through the country, through noisy cities, quiet villages, mountain roads and rice fields. Vietnam is very chaotic, intense and beautiful at the same time. Every day felt like an adventure. Until the day of the accident. The moment that forced me to confront something I'd never really considered before, that life can change in an instant, and sometimes completely outside of your control. After a month of recovery in Germany, I was left with a strange feeling. Gratitude for being alive, but also confusion. Because even after such a dramatic experience, I still didn't know what direction my life should take. So once again, I tried to find direction through studying. This time I chose psychology. And for reasons that still make me smile today, I decided to study it in Amsterdam, in Dutch, the language I barely spoke. At the time it seemed like a good idea, but very quickly reality caught up with me. Studying psychology in a foreign language while adapting to a completely new environment turned out to be much harder than I expected. After 1 semester I had to admit that it simply wasn't working. But during that time something else started growing in my life. Movement. I began spending more and more time in bouldering gyms. Climbing became a kind of meditation for me. At the same time, I continued practicing calisthenics, and slowly my relationship with training began to change. It wasn't just about building muscles anymore, it was about understanding what my body could do. But life in Amsterdam also confronted me with something very heavy. One of my roommates attempted to take his own life, and being so close to that situation deeply affected me. And for a while I entered one of the darkest mental periods of my life. Eventually I made the difficult decision to move back to my parents in Germany. At the time it felt like failure, but sometimes returning home is exactly what you need to rebuild yourself. After some time recovering mentally, I felt something familiar again. The desire to leave, to explore and to move. A good friend of mine was working as a scuba diving instructor on the Komodo Islands in Indonesia, and he invited me to visit him. So once again, I packed my backpack and boarded another plane. And once again, my life took a completely unexpected turn. The moment I experienced diving there, I fell in love with it. Entering the ocean felt like stepping into another world. It was very silent and weightless, and completely different from anything on land. But what fascinated me even more than diving itself was teaching, helping people stay calm in an environment that can easily trigger panic, guiding them through situations that required focus and trust. Through a series of coincidences, and probably because I spoke several languages, I was offered a job as a cruise director. My responsibility was to manage a 40-meter sailing yacht that organized exclusive dive expeditions. For weeks at a time, we traveled between Komodo and Papua New Guinea, just remote islands, untouched coral reefs, places so isolated that some villages had barely seen foreigners before. From the outside, it looked like the perfect life: adventure, ocean, responsibility. But slowly another feeling appeared, and that was loneliness. Guests came and left every few days. Most of the time, my world consisted only of the local crew and the endless ocean. Paradise can sometimes feel strangely empty, and there was something else I began to notice more and more. Diving, despite its beauty, comes with many dependencies. You depend on the currents, on your equipment, on the conditions of the ocean, on the people around you. Even the wildlife that makes the ocean so fascinating can be very dangerous. The deeper I immersed myself in that world, the more I became aware of how many factors had to align for every dive to be safe. The ocean gives incredible freedom, but only within strict limits. And slowly I started to feel those limits more and more. One evening my ex-girlfriend came to visit me on the boat. We climbed onto the roof of the yacht as the sun was setting. The ocean was completely calm and the sky turned orange and purple. We started doing some yoga together, and then she kicked up into a perfectly straight handstand, balanced against the sunset. And I remember standing there watching that moment. Something about felt different. It's hard to explain, but I think that was the moment I fell in love with the handstand. Not just as a trick, but as an expression of control, balance and awareness. And what fascinated me even more was the freedom it represented. Unlike diving, it didn't depend on any equipment, weather or conditions. You didn't need special gear or specific place. Just your body and a bit of space. You could practice it anywhere in the world, on a beach, in a park, on the roof of a boat at a sunset. And that time I had no idea that this small moment would eventually shape my entire life. After leaving Indonesia and Thailand, I eventually returned to Germany. For the first time in a long time, not because I had to, but because I felt like it was time. I started working as a French translator in online marketing for a Swiss company. Compared to the chaotic years of traveling and working on boats, this life suddenly felt very stable, predictable, structured, but inside of me something else was growing. I began training more seriously than ever before. Calisthenics, bouldering, bodyweight strength, and slowly the handstand that had appeared in small moments throughout my life began to return again. Not as a random skill anymore, but as a daily practice. At the same time, I decided that I wanted to finally complete a university degree. For a long time, I had carried that feeling that I had not finished anything, that I had dropped out too many times. So I enrolled in a program in international business and leadership. And even though the subject still didn't really excite me deeply, I knew that finishing it would give me something important, a sense of closure, and the possibility to study abroad again. During that time, my life had a very simple structure: university, training, work, repeat. I trained every single day, sometimes for hours, and I worked in a bouldering gym to support myself. Most of the time I had no real plan, but somehow with the help of my roommates and friends I managed to pass my exams. At university I also started learning Spanish, and very quickly a new idea began forming in my mind. I wanted to go to Mexico. Partly because I wanted to improve my Spanish, but also because Mexico has some of the most beautiful climbing areas in the world. And at that point, climbing had already become a huge part of my life. When I finally arrived in Mexico, something unexpected happened. On my very first day, I walked into a calisthenics gym. And there I met my first real coach. His name was Miguel. Until that moment, I had trained mostly on my own, learning from the internet, trying things, YouTube, failing, trying again. But Miguel introduced something completely different: structure, training plans, progression. He showed me that training could be a system, and suddenly calisthenics became the center of my life. The people in that gym became like a family. If I wasn't at university, I was training. And if I wasn't training, I was probably hanging on huge rock walls in some of the most beautiful climbing areas in the world. During that time, the handstand slowly became part of my daily routine. Even though my attempts were still very amateur, looking back now, that period in Mexico was incredibly important. Because it was the first time I truly experienced what it means to have a training community. People pushing each other, supporting each other, growing together. When the first COVID lockdown started, I was still in Mexico. But eventually I returned to Germany during the second lockdown. And suddenly everything changed again. Gyms were closed, communities disappeared overnight. Training became a very lonely process. I tried to stay motivated practicing handstands on my own. But something was missing. I needed guidance. I needed a teacher again. Around that time, a friend told me about a movement teacher named Ido Portal. The way she described his approach fascinated me. Movement not just as exercise, but as a deep exploration of the human body. So I started researching for teachers and connected to his work. And then something surprising happened. I discovered that one of his close students was teaching in Frankfurt, my hometown. His name was Merlin. One evening I wrote him a message. He invited me to join a movement session in a park. I remember arriving there not really knowing what to expect, but that evening changed my life. For the first time I saw someone moving on a level I had never experienced before. Strength, control, fluidity, complexity. It was something completely different from traditional fitness. Merlin quickly became more than just a coach for me. He became a mentor. And for the next 5 years, I reorganized my entire life around movement practice. I attended every single class I possibly could. Sometimes training 10 hours per week with the group. The first 2 years were incredibly humbling. I realized how limited my body actually was, how many weaknesses and restrictions existed that I had never even noticed before. But at the same time, I was deeply inspired. Every time I saw what was possible through movement, I wanted to learn more. We also began organizing movement camps, 7 days of practice, sometimes up to 10 hours a day. Strength, mobility, locomotion, somatic work, object manipulation, and of course, handstands. Those camps were intense, but they were also some of the most transformative experiences of my life. Merlin eventually became a close friend, and I will always be grateful for everything I was able to learn from him. Around that time, I also attended my first handstand workshop with Yuval Ayalon, also known as Yuval on Hands. That workshop opened another door. For the next 5 years, Yuval also became one of my most important teachers in hand balancing. We spent many hours training together, and through him I began understanding handstands on a much deeper level. Not just strength, but balance, alignment, efficiency, patience. And in 2020 I signed up for Ninja Warrior. To my surprise, I was selected to compete on the show. At that time I had already started working as a personal trainer, and the show gave me a lot of visibility. I made it into the top 40 athletes and was later invited to compete in the All-Stars edition. But over time, competitions became less important to me. What interested me more was movement itself, learning, teaching, and exploring the limits of the body. Training slowly became more serious, more focused, and more intentional. Around the same time, I started giving my first personal training sessions and started workshops. At first it was just a few clients, but something interesting happened. The more I learned, the more I could help others, and the results people experienced surprised me. Movement had a way of changing people beyond just physical fitness. Confidence, awareness, and connection with their body. I began traveling across Europe to attend workshops and intensives. Everything I earned, I reinvested into learning. Workshops, camps, private coaching. At the same time, I began teaching workshops myself. Sometimes on festivals, often almost for free, but I didn't care about the money. What I wanted was experience, the chance to teach, to experiment, to grow. Slowly, a small community started forming around my workshops. One evening, my roommate asked me if I wanted to try an acro yoga class at the university sports program. I had nothing planned that evening, and so I just joined. And what I saw there fascinated me immediately. 2 bodies moving together, like balancing, flying almost, completely weightless. Acro introduced a new dimension of movement for me. Working not just with your own body, but with another human being. My roommate and I practiced almost daily, trying new positions, learning through trial and error. Soon we started attending acrobatics festival, then circus festivals. Each event showing a new level of what the human body could do. But the path wasn't always easy. in 2024 we organized another movement camps. 6 days, 8 hours of practice per day. Immediately afterwards, I flew to Paris to attend a 5-day intensive with Yuval. My nervous system was completely exhausted, and shortly after returning, my relationship ended. My girlfriend at the time was also part of the movement group, and suddenly everything collapsed. I lost emotional stability, I lost weight very quickly, and some days I barely had the energy to get out of bed. And because she was still part of the training group, even going to practice became difficult. For the first time in years, I seriously questioned my path. Was becoming a movement coach really sustainable? Could I continue like this? Eventually, I decided to take a step back. I used my master's degree to search for a regular office job. After several months, I found a position as a headhunter in the center of Frankfurt. Beautiful office, great location, comfortable salary. From the outside, it looked like success. But after 4 weeks, I knew something was wrong. Every day after work, I went straight to the gym, training handstands, coaching my clients, and slowly I realized something important. The passion for movement had never disappeared. It had just been buried under exhaustion and doubt. At the same time, I felt something else. My chapter in Frankfurt was ending. The city that once felt like home no longer felt right. I began dreaming again. About freedom, about movement, about the place where my journey of independence had really started. Australia. Slowly, the idea became stronger, until one day I made a decision. I booked a flight to Sydney, leaving behind my business, my routines, and many people I cared about. But deep inside, I knew it was the right step. Through my coach Ulrich, I connected with Evelina and Kate Leckie. Even before I arrived in Australia, they offered me a job as a coach in their studio. And when I finally arrived in Sydney, something felt different. The community, the energy, the studio they built inside an old warehouse, a place that feels like a playground for adults. For the first time in a long time, I felt something familiar. It almost felt like coming home. I still don't know exactly where this journey will lead, but I know one thing. Movement has shaped my life in ways I could never have imagined, and I'm grateful for every step that led me here. I still don't really know where this journey is going, and I think for a long time that bothered me. I always felt like I needed a clear plan, like I had to figure everything out. But when I look back now, none of the important things in my life came from having a plan. They came from moving, trying things, failing, changing direction. Sometimes by choice, and sometimes just because life forced me to. The accident, traveling, losing direction, starting over again and again, all of it felt chaotic at the time, but somehow it always led me to the next step. And movement was the only thing that stayed consistent through all of it, not just as training, but as something I could return to no matter where I was, or what was going on in my life. I think that's what I've taken from all of this. Not that you need to have everything figured out, but that it's okay to not know, as long as you keep moving. Because sometimes that's how you find your direction.